Manager Johnson. What's wrong with you? Susan. Didn't I say in the group that we have to work overtime at noon today? Why are you late? I was taking a nap at that time. How could I know that there was a sudden notice of overtime work? I was asleep and couldn't see it. Susan looked innocent. Manager Johnson became even angrier when he saw that Susan dared to talk back. With just your education level, if you don't work hard in our company, which company outside would dare to hire you? This time, you'll be fined $500. Make sure to come on time for the next overtime. If you're late again, pack your things and get out of here. What a terrible company. The monthly salary is only $2,500. And we have to work overtime every day. It's exhausting. There's no overtime pay. And if you don't go for overtime, they even deduct money. And they keep brainwashing us every day. Susan. I refuse to be brainwashed. Manager Johnson. What? Susan took off her work uniform and threw it at Johnson. She looked disdainful, pointed at Johnson and said, I still won't come next time. I don't even care about this lousy company. You don't have a chance to fire me. Now, you're fired by me. Susan turned around gracefully and walked out of the office. Taking nothing but her phone, she went back to her rented apartment. Susan sent a message to her best friend Lily. I fired my boss. Lily was running her flower shop at that moment. Her phone suddenly rang with a new message. Seeing that Susan, who should be at work at this time, sent her a message, she panicked for a moment. After seeing the content, she was so shocked that she almost dropped her phone. She quickly called Susan. What's going on? Susan, who doesn't go crazy at work? Those who don't go crazy are rich people coming out to experience life. And I went crazy and quit my job without another offer. Lily, what are you going to do then? It's not easy to find a job nowadays. Even for a job like checking electricity meters, you need a master's degree. Besides, you only graduated from high school. Susan, I don't know what to do either. Quitting without another job is enjoyable for a moment. But looking for a job is like going to the gallows. Susan stared at the $251 balance in her bank account and fell into deep thought. Lily, how about you come to my flower shop tomorrow? Since you've quit your job, you can take a break for a while. Susan rolled her eyes inwardly. I can even hear your plan all the way from Paris. You're so obvious. Lily had recently met a fitness instructor boyfriend, and she wanted Susan to help her run the shop so that she could go on a sweet date. This woman is so heartless. I just lost my job, and she's still thinking about going on a date. Lily, come on. Susan, you're the best. Just help me run the shop for a while. I'll pay you $1,000 a month. As soon as Susan heard about the salary, her eyes lit up. Well, okay then, but I have to make it clear first. I'm not doing this because of the money. I'm doing it because I want you to hold on to your happiness tightly. Lily had a black line on her forehead and thought inwardly, I don't believe you at all. After hanging up the phone, Susan suddenly thought of the latest meme on TikTok. So she took a screenshot of the bank account balance of $251 and posted it on her Facebook, with the caption, I don't want to work hard anymore. A little ugly, a little lazy, a little chubby, a little short. Sell myself for $20,000. A minute later, a new message popped up on her WhatsApp. It was a transfer from Mark. Please receive $100,000. Mark is a new business tycoon. Rich, handsome, and talented, with a net worth of hundreds of millions of dollars. He is a client of Susan's company, because they had some business dealings before. To be precise, Johnson was fawning over him unilaterally. And it worked. Susan's boss Johnson took her to meet Mark a few times. So they have each other's contact on WhatsApp. Susan was stunned. Then Mark initiated a video call. There was no expression on his face. And he just said calmly, Susan, I'll give you $100,000 a month if you marry me to deal with my parents. After marriage, we won't interfere with each other's lives. Haha, I never dreamed that I'm just an ordinary worker. A bit of a nobody in society. My total assets are not worth mentioning. I'm an ordinary person. And he's a billionaire. And the plot of a domineering CEO falling in love with me. Oh no. The absurd plot of a domineering CEO having a flash marriage with me actually happened to me. The corner of Susan's mouth turned up slightly. And she sneered. Oomph, do I look like the kind of person who can be bought with money? For a big shot like Mark to marry her. Either he's drunk and not thinking straight, or he's doing some kind of charity. But, no matter what his reason is, if his first love or his mother throws money at her and asks her to name a price and leave Mark, it's not a bad deal either. Just as Mark was about to hang up the phone, his phone showed. The other party has confirmed the receipt. Susan. Thank you. Honey, Susan was filled with excitement. She was longing for the laid-back life in the future. The person on the screen was grinning so widely that her eyes were squinted into a thin line, revealing her cute dimples. The next day, Mark asked Susan to meet at the courthouse to get married, although Susan felt it was sudden. She was stunned for a moment and then gave a definite answer to Mark, sure, I'll marry you. Mark gives her 100,000 a month, which means 1.2 million a year, after getting married. She won't have to worry about money for the rest of her life. She can skip 50 years of struggling, not to mention just marrying him to deal with his parents. Even if he asked her to clean the tombstones of Mark's ancestors so that they could shine like mirrors, she would do it. If you have your parents' support, it's a smooth road. If you don't, it's a bumpy road. By the time others make their way out of the bumpy road, she'll already be on the highway. If she hadn't met Mark, she would still be struggling on that bumpy road. Although Susan's parents are quite wealthy, the family is patriarchal. There are 1 daughter and 3 sons in Susan's family. Susan was raised by the family's maid, Aunt Mary. Since she was born, her parents have never cared about her. Everyone knows that the daughter in the family is not favored at all. So when she was at school, she was always bullied by her classmates, especially by her classmate Emily. Susan knew that Mark's reason for marrying her couldn't be that simple. But no matter what his reason was, if Mark's first love or his mother threw money at her and asked her to leave Mark, it wouldn't be a loss. Susan and Mark got their marriage certificate in a hurry that afternoon. It wasn't Mark who was eager to get married, but Susan. She thought that such a good thing should be done as soon as possible. She couldn't afford to delay it for a moment. What if Mark suddenly came to his senses and regretted it? Then she would lose out on millions of dollars. As soon as they got the marriage certificate, they walked out of the courthouse. They didn't even step into the photo area next to it. Mark got into his black Rolls-Royce. Susan didn't get in. Instead, she stared blankly at Mark. Everything in front of her felt so unreal. Mark, I still have something to do at the company, so I'm going back first. I might come back a bit late tonight to be with you. If you have anything, ask the butler. After saying that, Mark drove away. Mark's butler walked up to Susan and said politely, Mrs. Mark, I'm Mr. Mark's butler, Mr. Brown. Mr. Brown led Susan to a colorful, gradient car. This is the car that our sir specially asked me to prepare for you. Susan's heart skipped a beat. Is this for me, Mr. Brown? Yes. Susan was shocked inside but pretended to be calm on the surface. She got into the luxury car in front of her without hesitation. People around them were amazed when they saw this colorful and noble car. Wow, this car is so beautiful. It must be very expensive. Right. This is the latest model of Rolls-Royce. It's really expensive. The starting price is at least 15 million. And this color should be a customized one. Wow, rich people are really different. Susan had a strange feeling in her heart. Since she was a child, apart from the maid, Aunt Mary, no one had ever given her such an expensive gift. Oh, wait, there was actually one other person, Eric. He was Emily's older brother, the girl who used to bully Susan at school. Eric had a crush on Susan. He always gave her a lot of expensive things and confessed his love to her many times. But Susan always refused him. Later, when Susan started working in society, sometimes she would regret why she hadn't accepted Eric's confession back then. In this society, if you don't have any connections, you'll be bullied everywhere. Even though Susan had refused him many times, he always persisted. He was always so gentle. Even after being rejected so many times, Eric was still very kind to her. Emily targeted Susan all the time just because her brother liked Susan. Emily knew Susan's status in her own family. She thought that their family was so noble, and that Susan, an ordinary little girl, was trying to get into their family. Emily believed that her brother was head over heels for Susan because Susan had seduced him first, but the feeling Susan got from the gift Mark gave her was different from the ones Eric gave. Susan couldn't quite put her finger on it. She just felt that her heart was filled with so much joy that it was about to overflow. Susan held the red marriage certificate in her hand and felt much more at ease. She was full of energy, thinking that she no longer had to worry about not having enough to eat in the future. She felt full of motivation. With 100,000 a month, how could she not be motivated? The colorful Rolls-Royce stopped downstairs at Susan's rented apartment. Butler Brown. Mrs. Mark, please go and prepare the things you want to bring. Sir said you can move in tonight. Okay. Butler Brown led a few people up to the door of Susan's rented apartment. Susan, why did you bring so many people? Butler Brown, we didn't know if you had a lot of things, so we just brought a few people. Oh, so they wanted to help her move her things. But now, she was a wealthy woman with a monthly income of 100,000. Susan felt a bit embarrassed when she was packing her things. That pink dress, although it was just an ordinary dress for others, was very special to her. She bought it with her first paycheck. It had great significance. She had been working for 3 years and had always been reluctant to wear it. It just hung there. And even just looking at it made her feel satisfied that in the end. Susan only took a little bit of luggage and left. There weren't many valuable things. There wasn't much to miss either. But just thinking that she had just paid 3 months' rent yesterday made her heart ache. At the Mark family mansion, Susan was arranged to share a room with Mark. Although she wanted to refuse. It was 100,000 a month. And looking at how busy Mark seemed to be, he probably wouldn't be home often. It was already midnight when Mark came back from work. As a champion of staying up late, midnight was just the beginning for Susan, since Mark hadn't come back. Susan didn't dare to lie on the bed. She just leaned on the sofa and lazily read a novel on her Kindle. As soon as Mark got home, he tugged at his tie and asked, "Where is she?" Butler Brown. Mrs. Mark is resting in your room. Mark walked straight upstairs. The door was closed. He pushed the door open and saw a woman inside wearing pink pajamas with cute cartoon patterns. A facial mask on her face. 2 slices of cucumber on her eyes. Her legs crossed and leaning lazily on the sofa. One hand holding a phone. And the other hand constantly putting the remaining cucumber slices into her mouth. According to the normal way of thinking, when a rich second-generation person like Mark marries someone, that person shouldn't they be excited and happy and then go on a shopping spree? This woman didn't seem to be very happy from the beginning until now, but anyway. Mark married her just because his mother had been urging him too much. Every time he visited his mother, she would keep nagging. Mark's mother wasn't in good health and had to go to the hospital for dialysis every Thursday. If it wasn't for his mother constantly nagging him to get married soon so that she could have a grandchild. Looking at the woman in front of him again. This woman really is. Mark murmured softly. Susan, who hadn't been paying much attention to the novel in the first place, jumped up when she heard the sound, and the cucumber slices fell to the ground. When Susan saw Mark, she lowered her head and looked like a little follower. Mr. Mark, if you have any orders, even if it means going through fire and water, I'll do it without hesitation. I'll serve you wholeheartedly. Mark rolled his eyes inwardly. When Susan saw that Mark didn't say anything, she looked up and secretly glanced at Mark. She saw that Mark had an unhappy expression on his face. Mark glanced at Susan out of the corner of his eye. What did you call me? Susan was confused. Honey. Mark retracted his glance and nodded in satisfaction. Yeah, call me that from now on. Now Mark was her benefactor, although Susan felt that she was being a bit of a sycophant. The person in front of her was her money provider. As long as he was happy, she could even call him Grandpa. Susan. Sure thing, Grandpa. Susan was shocked inside. Damn it, how did I say what was in my heart? What should I do? What should I do? This little thing was actually kind of cute. She was different from other women. Other women always deliberately did some strange things to get his attention. There's still something to deal with at the company. I'm leaving. After saying that, Mark walked straight out. Hey, wait a minute. She was so embarrassed about calling him the wrong thing just now. Susan was afraid that her pocket money would be deducted, so she tried to make up for it. Honey, She looked at Mark's back. Mark stopped and tilted his head slightly. He saw her big, sparkling eyes. She was so cute. No. Susan. Honey. Don't work too hard. After Susan said that, Mark didn't respond and just turned around and left. Susan didn't know if she could keep her pocket money this way. Looking at Mark's receding back, she leaned against the railing and furrowed her brow. Was she going to have her salary deducted on the first day here? And in Mark's heart, I'm laughing so hard. Ha. The next day, because Susan stayed up until 2 or 3 in the morning. She couldn't get up in the morning and didn't get up until noon. When Susan got up, there was a dignified and elegant old lady sitting in the living room. When Butler Brown saw Susan coming out of the room, he immediately came up to greet her and introduced the old lady to her. The lady downstairs is Sir's mother, Mrs. Mark Sr. As soon as Susan heard that it was Mark's mother, she couldn't help but slow down her steps a bit. She didn't expect to meet the parents so soon, seeing that Susan seemed to be deep in thought with her head slightly lowered. Butler Brown continued. Mrs. Mark Sr. isn't in good health and doesn't go out often. She goes for dialysis every Thursday. After she heard that Sir and you got the marriage certificate, she was very happy and brought you a gift. It can be seen that she values you very much. At this time, Susan just reached the downstairs. Mrs. Mark Sr. looked at Susan walking down the stairs and gave off a very approachable vibe. And when Susan saw the old lady, she also felt a bit of a sense of intimacy. Then wouldn't that mean there was no chance for her to throw money in her face and ask her to leave her son? Susan walked up to Mrs. Mark Sr. timidly. She sat down obediently and placed her hands properly, just like a kindergarten child ready to raise her hand to answer a question. However, for such a kind and amiable old lady, Susan saw a ghost floating above Mrs. Mark Sr.'s head. Ghosts follow people according to their personalities. There are 3 main types of ghosts: malevolent ghosts, evil ghosts, and little ghosts. Malevolent ghosts have taken human lives, have twisted mentalities, and have done all kinds of evil deeds before meeting a tragic end as retribution. Evil ghosts absorb people's vital energy according to different people's different personalities. If not eliminated, a person's vital energy will be completely drained. And little ghosts are formed by people who died accidentally. If one gets contaminated by them, they will suffer from illnesses. If not detected in time, there will be no way to save them. Yes, Susan has been able to see things that others can't since she was a child. Not only can Susan see these things, but she can also exorcise ghosts. It all started when she passed by a fortune-teller's stall after school when she was a child. A man dressed in old-fashioned clothes gave her a secret book with strange symbols on it. At first, Susan couldn't understand it. It wasn't until she dreamed of that man again that he taught her all the contents of the book. Susan had been tortured by wandering spirits before, but since she learned how to subdue demons and exorcise ghosts, she has become bolder. And the one above the old lady's head was a little ghost. She felt that she had to help the old lady get rid of the little ghost on her head, but she didn't know how to start. Good morning, Mrs. Mark Sr. Mrs. Mark Sr. pouted, tilted her head slightly to one side, and frowned as she said, You're still calling me Mrs. Mark Sr. You and our little Mark have already got the marriage certificate. You should change your address now. Susan didn't expect that the situation in reality was a bit different from the plot in novels. Why was Mrs. Mark Sr. being so polite? Did she really think highly of her? But she was so ordinary. Wouldn't she think that she wasn't good enough for her son? Susan gave a tentative cry. Mom. She felt that this scene was a bit familiar. She suddenly remembered that last night, Mark also asked her to change her address in a similar situation. They were indeed mother and son. Hey, Mrs. Mark Sr. said with a silly smile. Susan, now that you're part of our family, if little Mark bullies you, just tell me, and I'll teach him a lesson for you. Susan, a bit unfamiliar with this, called Mrs. Mark Sr. Mom. Mrs. Mark Sr. looked at her. I heard from the butler that you haven't been in good health. Why did you still come all the way here? You should just rest at home. We'll come to visit you when we have time. Mrs. Mark Sr. let out a sigh. By the time you come to visit me, I don't know when that will be. The old lady's dim eyes suddenly lit up again. Have you prepared everything for the wedding? I've checked the date for you. The 15th of next month is an auspicious day. Let's have the wedding on the 15th of next month. Get the wedding done early. I'm getting old. And I want to have a grandchild and enjoy my old age in peace. Susan looked at the old lady's eyes, which were sometimes dull and sometimes full of spirit. She thought the old lady was really cute. But Mark hadn't told her anything about this. They just got the marriage certificate yesterday. They only met once last night after getting the certificate and hadn't talked since then. Seeing the old lady's eyes full of anticipation, she swallowed the words she was going to say. Don't worry. We've already started preparing. We've just been waiting for you to choose an auspicious day. Mrs. Mark Sr. suddenly felt full of energy. Hee. I came at the right time. Mrs. Mark Sr. smiled kindly. Oh, right, Susan. You don't have any plans for the afternoon, do you? Accompany me to go shopping. I'm usually alone. And little Mark is so busy that he doesn't have time to accompany me. And I'm not in good health. It's rare for me to come out. Just accompany me for a walk. Seeing how enthusiastic Mrs. Mark Sr. was, Susan couldn't refuse her, but she didn't expect that. It turned out that rich people spent money like water. They used 100,000 as if it were just 100. She only had 251 in her hand now. Yesterday, she thought 100,000 was a lot. But now she suddenly felt that it wasn't enough. Susan had no choice and was too embarrassed to tell Mrs. Mark Sr. that she didn't have enough money. So, while Mrs. Mark Sr. was changing clothes, she called Mark. Hello, Mr. Mark. I'm shopping with your mother. Susan felt a bit embarrassed and didn't know how to say that she didn't have enough money. Mark already knew that Mrs. Mark Sr. would go to see Susan, but he didn't understand why she had to tell him about going shopping. Okay. Have a good time. I'm busy with work usually. Please accompany her well for me. Seeing that Mark still didn't understand her meaning, Susan frowned tightly. Well, Mr. Mark, is there anything else? Susan looked innocent, stammered, and her voice got softer and softer. It's just that, the things we bought, well, can they be reimbursed? Mark then realized what she meant. So she was running out of money. But he, Mark, was the richest man in Springfield. With a casual transfer, it could be 500,000. Mark. Just spend it. Call me if you need more. When Susan saw the 500,000 deposited into her bank account, her round eyes smiled like a crescent moon, revealing her cute dimples. With a bit of baby fat, Susan's smiling face showed a dimple on her chubby cheek. Mark couldn't help but take a screenshot. He really wanted to pinch her cheek. After accompanying Mrs. Mark Sr. shopping for a whole day, Susan was so tired that her legs were weak. She didn't expect that even though Mrs. Mark Sr. wasn't in good health, she could still walk around a lot. Susan knew that Mrs. Mark Sr. only had some minor illnesses, and the real troublemaker was the little ghost on Mrs. Mark Sr.'s head. But she couldn't just blatantly tell Mrs. Mark Sr. that there was a ghost on her head. That would surely scare her to death. If she wanted to send the ghost away, she also needed to find out how the little ghost died. If she forced it away, it would only be twice the effort for half the result. Finally, after sending the old lady back, Susan looked at her phone. Wow, when did I get so many missed calls? It was from her best friend Lily. Only then did she remember that she had promised to help Lily run the flower shop. As a result, as soon as Mrs. Mark Sr. came, she forgot about it. She quickly called back. Lily. Lily was angry. Humph, you're such a heartless person. You promised to help me run the shop, but you haven't come for 2 days. So love really does fade away, right? Susan quickly explained. It's not like that. Let me tell you, I've been busy getting married these 2 days. And today I accompanied my husband's mother to go shopping. Lily was stunned. This woman, when she was dating Susan, didn't even have a boyfriend yet. She just went on a 2-day date and came back. And now her little cabbage, Susan, had been eaten by a pig, metaphor for being taken by someone else. What the hell? You. Lily was both anxious and angry. She had so many questions now but didn't know which one to ask first. I just went out to play for 2 days and came back. And you've been taken by which pig? Woo. Susan felt a bit awkward. She had originally wanted to tell Lily. But Lily didn't answer her calls at all. This pig you should have met before. Lily was also a daughter from a prominent family and had met Mark before. Who? Mark. Lily was so shocked that her jaw dropped. Actually him. How could his eyesight be so bad? Why would he take a fancy to you? Susan looked helpless. My dear best friend. Can you wish me something good? Just as Lily was about to say something, Susan hung up the phone directly. Mark was back. He had been busy these days and had only been home once. He was really a busy person. As soon as Mark entered the house, he saw Susan sitting on the sofa, seemingly waiting for someone. Susan looked at Mark. Mr. Mark, you're back, Susan. Mr. Mark, when do you have some free time? Let's have our wedding. Seeing that Mark still didn't say anything, it seemed that she had to bring up Mrs. Mark Sr. to convince him. Mrs. Mark Sr. said that the 15th of next month is an auspicious day. I know. Mark said coldly and then went upstairs. She always felt that Mark today seemed a bit different from the past few days. He seemed to be in a bad mood today. So, seeing Mark go upstairs, she followed him eagerly when Mark entered the room. And Susan was thinking about how to tell Mark about the little ghost on his mother's head with her head down. She bumped into Mark, who suddenly stopped. Mark and Susan had a big height difference. Mark was 6 feet, about 183 centimeters, tall, while Susan was only 5 feet 2 inches, about 158 centimeters, tall. The difference was quite significant. Mark turned around and looked down at Susan, who was standing there stunned and looking at him. I'm going to take a shower. You, go out. Susan hesitated to speak. Wait a moment, Mark. He still seemed very angry. Could it be because she asked Mark for money today? Are you angry because I asked you for money today? Mark saw that she still didn't know what she had done wrong. And he was even more annoyed. He walked around Susan and went to the back, closed the door, and locked it. Susan thought, what on earth does he want to do? Susan hugged her shoulders with both hands and said, we agreed that after getting married, we wouldn't interfere with each other's lives. Mark looked at the little person in front of him. Feeling both angry and amused, Mark picked Susan up in a princess carry and threw her onto the bed. His heavy body pressed down on Susan's small and thin body. It seemed as if he could crush her. But in reality, Susan was extremely strong. After all, she was an exorcist who could catch ghosts. We've already got the marriage certificate. Don't call me Mr. Mark. Call me honey. Susan had 3 black lines on her forehead. Was he angry just because of this? Susan pushed against Mark with both hands and smiled apologetically. Got it. Honey, okay. Mark's expression softened a lot. I'll sleep in the study. You can sleep here. Are you kidding me? Susan was doing this job for the money. How could she let her benefactor sleep in the study? What if Mark brought his first love back and it would be inconvenient to chat in the study? No, Mr. Ma, honey, you've worked so hard at work. You can sleep in the room. Mark, okay. Rich people were really different. Even the study, except that it was a bit smaller than the master bedroom, had a bed that was 6 feet 6 inches, about 2 meters, wide. It also had an independent bathroom. And it had everything that should be there. It was just an extra study room. The next day, Mark got up early and went to work. And Susan didn't wake up until noon. Obviously Mark was her boss. But it gave her the feeling that Mark was working for her. Susan had nothing to do at home all day, besides playing games with her best friend on Xbox, browsing TikTok, and reading novels on her Kindle. She had nothing else to do. So she decided that she was going to start getting rid of that floating thing, the ghost. Because Mrs. Mark Sr. was already in her 40s, and with a little ghost attached to her, it was easy to shorten her lifespan. However, Susan didn't have Mrs. Mark Sr.'s phone number. She picked up her phone and called Mark. Hello, Mark's voice was a bit lower. He should be in a meeting. Susan also spoke as if she had a guilty conscience. Honey, I want to go and have fun with our mom, but I don't have her WhatsApp number. Can you recommend it to me? Mark asked in a somewhat funny and gentle way. Did you win over my mom so quickly? The big executives in the meeting were stunned when they heard Mark's gentle voice. Mark actually had a gentle side. Susan. Because. Susan hesitated to speak. She didn't want to say that it was because she wanted to catch the little ghost. No one would believe her. Mark didn't have time to chat with her either. Before Susan could finish speaking, he sent Mrs. Mark Sr.'s WhatsApp contact to her, after making an appointment with Mrs. Mark Sr. Susan changed into a set of equipment. She wore a light yellow dress and coiled up her fluffy hair with a silver cross necklace. The silver cross necklace had tassels, and there was a small teardrop-shaped pendant on it. It was only as big as a little finger, but the small teardrop-shaped pendant had a great function. She arrived at Mrs. Mark Sr.'s villa in Riverdale. Although it was called a home, Susan thought it was more like a private hospital. As soon as she entered the door, a smell unique to a hospital hit her. She couldn't help but shiver. The last time she saw Mrs. Mark Sr., she was full of energy and dressed elegantly. This time when she saw Mrs. Mark Sr., she was sitting weakly in a wheelchair, looking more haggard, and the little ghost on her head was trying hard to suck her vital energy. Susan. Mom. Mrs. Mark Sr. Oh, Susan. You're finally here. You haven't accompanied me to go shopping for a long time. How about we go for a walk this afternoon? Susan made a gesture that it was absolutely not possible. No. Susan looked around. The midday sun was especially dazzling. She had an idea. Mom. We can go and have fun together another day. Let's just go and bask in the sun today. Mrs. Mark Sr. seemed afraid that Susan would leave soon. Hee. Okay, but you have to stay with me all day today. Susan. Okay. Susan pushed Mrs. Mark Sr. to the garden behind the villa. It was summer now. A nice season. All kinds of flowers were in full bloom in the garden, competing with each other. But summer was the season with the strongest positive energy among the 4 seasons. How could Mrs. Mark Sr. have attracted a little ghost? Mrs. Mark Sr. seemed to have opened up a chatterbox when she was with Susan. They were in the garden, admiring the flowers while chatting non-stop, although Susan was talking so much that her mouth was dry. It was the first time that the old lady had talked so much, and as she talked, she fell asleep. Here came the opportunity. Susan made hand signs with both hands and silently recited a spell in her mouth. If you often walk by the river, your shoes will surely get wet. If you want to pass this way, leave some road money. The little ghost sitting on the old lady's head watching the show. At this time, the silver cross necklace emitted a faint and almost imperceptible light. Susan threw the hairpin towards Mrs. Mark Sr.'s head, and a faint red thread appeared in her hand, wrapping around the little ghost. The little ghost was shocked. She didn't expect that there was actually someone who could see her. Susan, tell me, when were you born? When did you die? What's your birth date and time? How did you die? And why did you possess Mrs. Mark Sr.? The little ghost stuck out her tongue. Humph, you little girl think you can catch me? The little ghost looked disdainful. The youngest exorcist she had ever seen was at least in their 50s. And the oldest was over 100 years old. They had all been practicing for decades. Some of them even started learning hand signs since they were little and had practiced for 100 years, but still couldn't catch her. Just this young girl in front of her. When the little ghost exerted some strength and was about to break free from the restraint. What? Why can't I transform anymore? Susan smiled and showed her cute dimples. You don't want to cooperate, so you prefer to be forced. Then came Susan's favorite part. Susan tightened the red thread in her hand and threw it directly to the ground. Smack! The little ghost was smashed to the ground. Her head was flattened. Her eyes popped out and rolled to Susan's feet, and her hand was twisted 360 degrees. But her main body was still tightly attached to Mrs. Mark Sr. the little ghost. This was the first time someone had smashed her so miserably. Susan, still not going to talk. The little ghost looked haughty. It was impossible for this girl to subdue her. Seeing that the little ghost had no intention of speaking, Susan directly started swinging her back and forth with force. While swinging, she made sounds like, hey, ha, hey, ha. Just then, Mark pushed the door open and saw the scene in front of him. Mrs. Mark Sr. was sleeping in the wheelchair, and Susan was swinging left and right in the air, and then throwing left and right hooks. Is this woman crazy? Mark was speechless. Susan. Why was Mark here too? Mark, what are you doing? Susan. I'm catching a little ghost. Ah, Mark. It seems she's really gone crazy. After Mark came, Susan had no choice but to let the little ghost go. I'll let you off this time, but I won't spare you next time. At this time, the little ghost was already dazed from being smashed. Her limbs had fallen to the ground, but her main body was still connected to Mrs. Mark Sr.'s head by many thin threads. After Susan let go, the little ghost floated back to Mrs. Mark Sr.'s head. The little ghost covered her head and cried. She was a girl. How could this person be so rough with her? Didn't she know how to show some mercy to a delicate flower? Woo 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 XX. Susan. Few ghosts who don't go to reincarnate and always stay in the human world will eventually vanish into thin air. Come into my teardrop-shaped pendant quickly. I'll send you to the underworld to cultivate. Mark watched Susan muttering softly to the air and furrowed his brows slightly. He walked up to Susan. It was just the time of the sunset. The red setting sun dyed her two black buns a dark red color. A gentle breeze slowly blew up a few strands of hair on both sides of her face. Her chubby cheeks clearly showed two dimples, and her pink lips were a bit dry. Mark couldn't help but purse his lips. When Susan saw Mark staring at her without saying anything, she shivered inside. Honey, what's wrong just now? Butler. Take Mrs. Mark Sr. back to her room to rest. Mark interrupted her. The butler pushed Mrs. Mark Sr., who was in the wheelchair, into the room. Mark followed closely behind. Susan looked at his back and ran in after him. Was he scared? In the living room, Mark crossed his legs, took a sip of tea, and stared straight at her. She knew this question. Surely it was her strange behavior that scared him. And that's why Mark had that look in his eyes. She blinked her eyes, looking embarrassed but still forced a smile and said, just now, Mrs. Mark Sr., our mom fell asleep, and there were a lot of mosquitoes around. I was afraid they would disturb her sleep, so I was trying to drive them away. Mark. Okay. How could Mark believe her excuse? He might have believed it if there were mosquitoes in other places. But this was the Mark family's house. The flowers and plants in the yard were of a special variety that emitted a smell that ordinary flying creatures couldn't get close to. Okay. Susan was confused. So did he believe her or not? Let's go. Go home. Mark had originally planned to come and visit his mother, and then he received Susan's call in the afternoon. After he and she got married, they hadn't visited his mother yet, so he wanted to take this opportunity to bring Susan to officially meet his mother. He had originally thought of having a meal here before leaving, but now that his mother had fallen asleep, they had to go back. Susan looked towards the upstairs, in the direction of Mrs. Mark Sr.'s room. This matter couldn't be delayed any longer. The vital energy of the elderly and children was relatively weak. If they were absorbed by a little ghost, they probably wouldn't be able to hold on for long. Susan thought that Mark was in a hurry to go back. She didn't know if he was in a hurry to have a date with his first love or if he really had to work overtime. How about this? Susan grabbed Mark, who was about to get up and leave. I'll stay here with our mom tonight. Even if it wasn't for the little ghost, Susan would still stay and accompany Mrs. Mark Sr. This huge villa. It must be lonely for someone who has trouble moving around to live here alone. That's right. Loneliness. Ghosts would choose people to attach to according to their personalities. And the little ghost on Mrs. Mark Sr.'s head was likely a loneliness ghost. She was even more determined to stay this time. Mark. Running out of money. Mark immediately transferred her 1,000,000 if you're short of money. Just tell me directly. There's no need to play these fake tricks. I've seen plenty of them. If he went back alone, and Mrs. Mark Sr. woke up the next day and saw that Susan had stayed here alone all night without going home, Mrs. Mark Sr. Would be suspicious, Susan. How could she make him believe her? I can cure Mrs. Mark Sr.'s illness. This was the only way she could think of to make Mark let her stay, Mark sneered. Dr. Foster Black. A famous doctor from abroad. Graduated from a well-known school. He has won countless awards. He has been practicing medicine for over 20 years and has created more miracles than the salt you've eaten. Your age doesn't even match his experience. Do you think I'll believe you? Susan was really out of options, so she had to use her trump card. She coughed and softened her voice. Oh, honey, please, Susan pouted while softening her voice. Showing her deep dimples, Mark had seen many soft-voiced women. But this kind of low-quality act was a first for him. Mark couldn't help but laugh. He felt a little warmth in his heart. Susan saw Mark smile for the first time. Although it was just a faint smile, it was extremely charming. Her heart couldn't help but flutter, and her big, watery eyes blinked at Mark. Mark couldn't help but ruffle Susan's hair. Okay. As soon as he said, okay, Mark regretted it. What on earth was going on? Why did he give in so easily? He was supposed to be a cold and unfeeling domineering CEO. Right. And yet, he was won over just like that. Butler Brown watched the two in front of him and wanted to laugh the whole time. At night, Mark and Susan had no choice but to sleep in the same room, because they couldn't let Mrs. Mark Sr. know that they didn't really know each other well. Since Mark was Susan's money giver, the bed was naturally given to Mark. And Susan slept on the floor. Mark was such a person. He had no idea how to be gentle to a woman. He was such a typical, straight as an arrow, guy. No wonder he had been single all this time. The next day, Mrs. Mark Sr. woke up very early. Maybe it was because she had fallen asleep too early yesterday and hadn't taken her medicine. Not long after Mrs. Mark Sr. woke up, Susan also woke up. Susan had been tossing and turning all night, unable to sleep. Of course, it wasn't because of sleeping on the floor. It was because she had been thinking about Mrs. Mark Sr.'s situation all the time. This couldn't be delayed any longer. If it was, someone's life would be in danger. After Susan woke up, she didn't see Mark. She went downstairs and saw him having breakfast with Mrs. Mark Sr. Susan looked at Mrs. Mark Sr. This is really bad. At this time, Mrs. Mark Sr.'s face had become much paler. A faint image like a burning incense stick was appearing and disappearing above her head. The little ghost on her head was already fully fed. Susan regretted not getting rid of the little ghost as soon as possible yesterday. Mrs. Mark Sr. didn't have much time left. What should she do? At this moment, Mrs. Mark Sr. was chatting and laughing with Mark while having breakfast. Suddenly, she coughed violently. Puff! She spat out a mouthful of blood and fainted to the ground. Susan saw several of Mrs. Mark Sr.'s souls flying away in all directions. She gently twisted her fingers and said to Mrs. Mark Sr., "Stay grounded. In the name of the law. Hurry. Recover. Those souls." As if they had been suppressed for a long time and suddenly regained their freedom. Flew away so fast that it seemed like their butts were smoking, and even their fur was gone. If the souls weren't called back quickly, Mrs. Mark Sr.'s body would be occupied by the little ghost on her head. In simple terms, Mrs. Mark Sr. would become a scapegoat. Mark panicked. He stood up abruptly and picked up Mrs. Mark Sr. in his arms, carrying her to the room. Butler, butler, call the doctor. Hurry and call Dr. Foster Black. Dr. Foster Black lived not far from here. Mark had arranged for Mrs. Mark Sr. to live in Riverdale for convenience. Butler Brown. I've already informed Dr. Foster Black. He'll be here in a few minutes. Susan looked at Mark's flustered expression. She couldn't wait any longer. She had to act now. Susan quickly ran to Mark's side. Waiting for that Dr. Black won't work. Our mom can't hold on much longer. Can you trust me just this once? Mark looked at her with a serious expression. Susan. Now our mom's souls have scattered. We can only call them back. She looked around the room and asked Mark. First, light 3 incense sticks. Then, burn the clothes that Mrs. Mark Sr. usually wears. Do you know what clothes our mom usually wears? Honey. Mark's expression was complicated. He didn't believe it, but he had no choice but to try this desperate measure. Butler Brown brought 3 incense sticks. And Mark brought a vintage dress that Mrs. Mark Sr. had worn when Susan first saw her. After everything was ready, Susan started her ritual. Susan took the silver cross necklace from her head. Come back early at night. There are a lot of bad guys out there. Not every bad guy is as kind-hearted as me. A young girl like you should take good care of yourself. Do you understand, Mark? Was she making fun of him? After saying that, Susan blew on the silver cross necklace. With Mrs. Mark Sr.'s clothes this time, the souls that had flown in all directions were called back, one by one. They obediently entered Mrs. Mark Sr.'s body after calling back Mrs. Mark Sr.'s souls. Her complexion recovered a bit. Now, Susan decided to deal with the little ghost on her head as well. Little ghost, it's your turn. Susan stared at the little ghost. One last chance. Are you going to talk or not? The little ghost was intimidated by her aura, but she was still stubborn. She refused to talk. Seeing that the little ghost still wouldn't talk, Susan silently recited a spell, gently picked up a thin red string, and tightly wrapped it around the little ghost. With a sudden pull, she directly yanked the little ghost off Mrs. Mark Sr.'s head. The little ghost. Why could this girl in front of her yank her off the host's head? This didn't make sense. Usually, people could at most give her a beating. But yanking her off was a first. That it seemed this girl was really something. Mark watched Susan pulling at nothing in the air and fell into deep thought. Finally, the little ghost said, "My name is Lisa. I was 25 years old. I was born in Springfield. I took my own life." Susan. Why, Lisa? Because my parents never liked me since I was a child. Eventually, my personality became very strange and withdrawn. I had no friends. I was very lonely. No one liked me. I felt like the whole world had abandoned me. There was no place for me in this world. Later, I got depressed. I often cried and had trouble sleeping. One time, I just couldn't take it anymore. I turned on the gas. And then slowly. Susan. Then how did you possess Mrs. Mark Sr.? Lisa. I'm a loneliness ghost. I was attracted to her by the smell of loneliness she exuded. Susan looked at Mark with a meaningful expression. Mark was a bit confused by Susan's gaze. Susan shook the silver cross necklace in her hand. Well, you should have gone to the underworld to be reincarnated. But you've stayed in the human world for too long and can't go back. Let me take you in. When you get back to the underworld, you can also accumulate good deeds to get a chance to be reincarnated. If you insist on not entering my hairpin, you'll be completely destroyed. You know, Lisa wasn't stupid. She quickly got into the small teardrop-shaped pendant on Susan's silver cross necklace. Mark watched Susan talking to nothing in the air. After taking in Lisa, Susan put the silver cross necklace back on. Just as she put it back, Dr. Foster Black arrived. Dr. Foster Black was stunned when he saw the brazier and the 3 incense sticks in front of him. Then he walked around those things and came to Mrs. Mark Sr.'s side. He took a small flashlight and looked at Mrs. Mark Sr.'s eyes. They were normal. Then he looked at her tongue. It was normal. He listened to her heartbeat. It was actually normal too. Dr. Foster Black looked at Mark in surprise. This was the most incredible miracle he had ever seen in his life. Strange. When I examined Mrs. Mark Sr. last Thursday, she was on her last breath. Now Mrs. Mark Sr. seems to have been reborn. I believe that after a few more days of rest, she will be completely back to normal. Dr. Foster Black also thought it was very strange. Clearly, she was beyond hope. But how could she get better all of a sudden? Could his medicine really be that powerful? But, no. He shook his head. He thought he was just that amazing. When Mark heard Dr. Foster Black's words, the worried look on his face finally disappeared after hearing that Mrs. Mark Sr. was okay. He looked at Susan with a meaningful glance. Susan happened to look at him at the same time. The two looked at each other, and Susan gave a knowing smile, her curved eyes and cute dimples. Finally, they lived happily ever after.